topics that you need while reviewing your papers. And please let me know if you don't hear me well. Okay? Because sometimes I think that is not clear. It's one of the topics that you need while reviewing the papers. And it requires really an open-minded view. We expect you at the end of the lecture to be able to analyze the articles and the procedure related to the articles with a critical mind. In other words, you have to use your critical thinking carefully while reading the article. Is it clear, the presentation?
Yes, good, Doctor.
Okay. The second one, to demonstrate the critical thinking in appraising research findings. In other words, you have to, while you are given any paper, look at your critical thinking as a part of the evaluation and appraising the paper. The concept of critical thinking, we can say, comes from the root in ancient Greek. The root word from the Greek consists of two words. Kritikos, meaning discerning judgment in Greeks. Criterion, in other words, the standards. Then you have two concepts. One is the kritikos, the second one is the criterion. Unit the criteria or the criterion with the critics. In Weber's New World Dictionary, a critical thinking is a careful analysis and judgment followed by an attempt to determine both merits and faults. In other words, when the reader is reading, is looking into the argument, into the thinking process, into the ideas proceeded by the author in the paper, as in research, the idea that are in the paper, you look at it with criticos and criteria. In other words, with a judgment based on the standards. That is the main idea that critical thinking is about. Then critical thinking consists of three components. One is analytical part, second, evaluative part, the third, creative component. However, the creative component is more of a different part of the brain. Hello, who raised his hand? Nur Faqiha? Nur Faqiha?
Oh, it's nothing, Doctor. I missed it.
Then put down your hands. You have question, Faqiha?
No, I don't, Doctor.
Done. Okay. Then three dimensions are quite at the base of critical thinking. One is analytical part, second, evaluative part, third, creative part. However, the creative part is more of a perception. It's not, doesn't fall much into critical thinking. We include it in critical thinking only in a sense that if you use your creative thinking, at the end, to evaluate your creative thinking, your creative ideas, you have to use critical thinking. Then critical thinking comes as an evaluation tool in creative thinking. That's why in modern writings, you will find that creative thinking is a different topic. They do not classify it under critical thinking. Okay? Dimensions of critical thinking then. Critical thinking is the mode of thinking in which the thinker improves the quality of his or her thinking by skillfully analyzing, assessing, and reconstructing the thinking part. You analyze your own in regards with the paper you are reading. You analyze the author's view using certain criteria that you developed yourself. The basic idea is you do analysis. After conducting the analysis, you need to do an assessment. Then, after the assessment, you need to reconstruct your thinking. In other words, your thinking by yourself, if required to be reconstructed, you need to reconstruct it. Simply because we, as a human being, do not mostly learn to think critically. Mostly, we take the shortcuts. The brain is a very powerful and interesting mechanism given to us. It has what is called shortcuts. And many times it relies on shortcuts. It doesn't want to go to the long details because if it does so, it will not be so effective. To be efficient and effective, the brain takes the shortcuts and reach the conclusion. For example, if I ask you, where do you live? You say to me, I'm living in Puchong. I'm living in Kel. You do not give me the details how to get into where you live exactly. Because I just ask you, where do you live? You make me a shortcut answer. Or how do you get to your place? You just say to me, you take bus, you drive, you do this and get there. This is correct and true, but it's a shortcut. It doesn't give the details. That's why the brain, the effectiveness and efficiency of the brain, because of its ability to use the shortcuts. Critical thinking requires more detail because it tries its best to avoid the what is called fallacies. Fallacies are mistakes, errors that comes with shortcuts. When thinking is based on shortcuts, there are many mistakes human commits along the thinking process. To avoid these mistakes, critical thinking comes in, but it requires more depth effort. That's why the brain usually is not inclined to think it unless otherwise needed. That's why for us to use it, we need to train ourselves, and we will see what are the steps we need to take. Okay, one, critical thinking requirement of critical thinking. One is the following: self-directed. You have to direct yourself to the thinking point. You have to direct yourself to the author and the paper that you are reading. Self-directed. Second, self-discipline. You have to discipline yourself in setting up your argument and following the argument set in a paper, one by one, step by step. Third, self-monitor. You have to monitor yourself because if you don't monitor yourself, what happens is along the line you deviate from the original standard that you set. So you have to monitor yourself. And corrective thinking. Also, you need to correct yourself. Not all what comes in your thinking are right, are correct. Then you yourself need to correct yourself before correcting others, or you would see the correction in the others. Am I clear? Class?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then who can tell me what are the requirements of critical thinking? Anyone to answer? Otherwise, I will pick up the names.
Monitoring.
Monitoring. Thank you, Diana.
Directed.
Thank you. Who's that one? Directed. Okay. Anyone else?
Discipline.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Discipline.
Discipline. Good. That's Jana.
No,
Nurul. Anis. Nurul.
Anis, doctor.
Nurul. Okay. Anis. Okay. Shafiqa. Shafiqa. Sharina. Shahira.
Yes, doctor.
Any other points? Because I want you to remember, you don't have the slides, you have to follow up and carefully follow me. We have self-discipline, self-directed, self-monitoring, and what else?
Corrective
Thinking.
Self-corrective. Okay, self-corrective. You have to correct yourself. Okay? Then I can proceed. Now, criteria to analyze thinking is to identify okay. Criteria to analyze thinking is to identify its purpose, questions, information, assumptions, main concepts, point of view, conclusions, and implications. These are not the conclusive or exclusive, but they are just main points. Don't think that these are the all criteria, but these are some of the fundamental criteria in critical thinking. One, you have to determine the purpose to thinking. A paper should have a proper purpose. The first statement you read in most papers identify the purpose. In the first statement, the first sentence usually express the purpose. If not at the first sentence, at the last sentence in the abstract, we call it thesis statement. The author expressed clearly the purpose, the objective of the paper. And this objective has so many names. So can be called aim, objective, purpose, and so on. Sometimes also it comes in a form of a question, not directly stated as a purpose or aim or objective, but stated as a question mark. That question mark is aiming to identify the purpose. Then while reading, you should keep in mind the purpose. And the purpose behind, there are questions. Definitely in your discourse, you will read the questions and hypothesis. You set your questions, turn your questions into hypothesis. Then in any paper, there are questions explicitly or implicitly expressed by the author. And the author is having this question in mind while conducting the research. Then, while also you are in the paper, you should keep in mind to identify the questions the author expressed explicitly or implicitly in the paper and keep it in mind while reading the paper. Because it's one of the criteria in the analysis. For example, what would you do if you have find a paper and there is no clear question? Okay, who can answer? Or who can attempt to answer? No precise, clear question.
You won't know the direction of the paper.
One, good. You will not know the direction of the paper. Excellent. Anyone else?
There won't be clear objectives to the paper.
Right. The objective will not be clear because if the question is not clear, the objective will not be clear at all. At all, will not be clear. Second, I hope my team will not stop. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, can you
Because
hear me?
my team is giving me a headache. Is that making trouble? Teams is not responding. Okay, let me close and reopen again.
All right, doctor.
Hello, can you hear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, can you?
Yes, okay. Okay. Anyone else to attempt? Because one, if the question is not clear or expressed implicitly or explicitly, the purpose will not be clear. Okay. What else would you do? You have find a paper, the objective and the question are not clear from the beginning.
Getting wrong conclusion.
Possible, very possible wrong conclusion. Will you proceed reading the paper?
Sorry, doctor?
Will you proceed reading the paper?
No.
No.
The answer is likely no. Because even if you read the rest, you might not be benefiting from the paper. Then the objective, the questions are the key in the paper. Next, the information. Information provided, you call it data, you call it the tools, you call it the whatever way of data collection is used. Also, you will find in the paper assumptions, mostly. Assumptions also could be expressed directly or indirectly. Could be explicitly expressed. It might not also be explicitly expressed, but you will find that the author used the words indicating assumption. In the point of view, according to the author assumes even more clear, but sometimes they don't assume, they say, according to this paper or according to this view. If the author's view is that view, that means he's assuming that possibility. Then, while analyzing papers, you should look at assumptions also, because assumptions are the guiding pillars for you to judge at the end. Does the author or the paper or the research respect the assumptions it makes at the beginning, or it violates? When it violates, the conclusion become under question mark. That's why also assumptions are significant. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, good. Main points. To summarize the paper, make it easy for you, look at the main points. The main points are telling you how the paper is heading, how the author is thinking, which you know, because quite often you summarize your topics, you read your books and summarize the main points. It telling you what the author is having in mind. That's why when you are reading any paper, between lines, you can automatically pick up the ideas, the main ideas. and you can see how the author is trying to support the idea or refute the idea. You could be supporting or trying to reject the idea using different argument. Okay. Next, point of view. There are points which is subjective, not clearly guided, and you will see it within the paper also. It's not directly mentioned, but you have to be alert on it, because there are points that have no evidence behind, no support. Without any support, there is a point of view until supported become an evidence. Then also you need to look at the conclusions. Conclusions are a very important part in the research. Looking at the conclusion, you have to look at back at the purpose, questions, assumptions, main concept. All this comes in the conclusion, because if the conclusion is not in line with the question at the beginning, or not in line with the purpose at the beginning, or not in line with the assumptions at the beginning, you start putting question mark in the conclusions, in the whole paper also. Then at the beginning, the author may be reasoning well, conducting the research well, going, but at the conclusion, something has gone somewhere wrong along the line. Then my question to you is, if you read a paper, you find the conclusion is not consistent with the purpose or at the or the introduction, what would be your stand?
Maybe they didn't answer the question that they asked in the beginning.
One, you answer the question at the paper. Anyone else?
I would think that they didn't understand their own research. Because if you're concluding something different to what you talked about, then it means you didn't get the whole point of the study.
Okay, Jenna, can you adjust it a bit? Because usually researchers put their own questions, then they definitely somehow understand it. But along the line, what may happen? Jenna?
I guess lose track of the point of the question.
Sorry, again, I can hear you well.
Can you hear me, doctor? Sorry, the mic is acting up. Hello.
Okay, now I don't get your point. Anyone else?
Is it that the results don't match their assumptions?
Good. But why? What are the possible reasons? This is my question. You are right. Results do not fit into the assumptions or the question of the purpose. But what are the possible reasons?
Maybe there is bias with the results.
Good. How the bias comes in? Ajana?
The bias going to come in, maybe he has a certain...
I think the bias is related to the assumption.
Yeah, right. But one more thing. Good. All of you are thinking well, but I want to more. What you say is right. I want a more bright answer. The conclusion is not in line with the introduction or the purpose. What might be the reasons? Bias, right? Where bias comes in. One way is in data collection. Or errors in data analysis. The author may have a clear idea, working on it, but along with the line collecting data, bias comes in. When bias comes in, the result will show at the end. One of the possible reasons. Second possible reason, also the data collection was fine, and everything smooth at the end, but the analysis is not in line with the data collection. You will learn in this course what type of analysis do you need for what type of data. Okay, so far, which class do you have in the morning? Can you tell me? After briefing, what class do you have?
It was the overview for this course and the type of
Study design.
study design, yeah.
Yes, type of study design. Okay, say I designed a study using survey, or I designed a study using experiment. Are these two types of study same?
Sorry, doctor, can you repeat your question?
I designed a study using survey, or I designed another study using experiment. One I call experimental study, the other one I call survey study. What's the difference?
Experimental, we intervene with the sample or the person, while the
Survey.
the survey is just by observation. We do not intervene.
Good. Excellent. Experiment requires intervention. You control the variables. Usually in experimental studies, you have control variables and the control variables and the observed variable. You will control one, the other one you leave it, don't control it, to see it how it behaves, to compare the two. In survey, you are most likely have to use only observations or questionnaire or data collections which doesn't allow you to manipulate. And manipulation is not mostly in survey. Manipulation is mostly in experiment. The data you collected using experiment, what if you go and analyzing the data using the survey techniques, or you take vice versa, survey data you analyze using experimental data techniques, you might not come to a good or valid conclusion. Your conclusion may be under question mark because of the nature of the data you have. You may have in one continuous data, in the other one you have discrete data or dichotomous data or non-continuous data. Then you can't use the same techniques. Then here conclusion may not be the same as at the beginning. The implication, the last point here, in the research also you must look at the implication. In research, the implication is the main objective. Implication is the most important part in the finding. Could be scientific implication, could be academic implication, could be research itself implication. Some researches, you can't implement it in real life, but it gives information to the other researchers. It tells them, hey, these are the points. While conducting research in this field, you have to look at this and this and this. Then the implication is very relevant to researchers, other researchers. Okay? Okay, let me reverse. I want to, anyone who can tell me two of the criteria in assessing in analysis of thinking in research. Those who answer at the beginning, I try to avoid them. I want to look at the others. Anyone to attempt? Can I see your names? Otherwise, I pick up your names. Abu Huzaifa? Abu Huzaifa? Tada, not in class. Al-Mu'min, Ahmad?
Yes, doctor.
Can you give me one or two of the points I just mentioned?
What was the question again?
The questions we just discussed, the criteria in analyzing thinking in a research paper. List any two criteria.
Criteria of analyzing thinking, is it?
Yes.
Information, purpose.
The purpose, the information. Okay, fine. Thank you. Ahmad Khairul? Fitri? Ahmad Khairul Fitri? Ahmad Khairul Fitri, are you in a class or just hanging around? Aida Amira?
Yes.
Okay. Will I mark anyone who doesn't respond as absent? Anyone who doesn't respond, I will mark you as absent. Aida Amira?
Yes.
Okay. Can you give me the other two criteria?
Conclusion and assumptions.
Assumptions. Conclusion, assumptions. Good. Aina Fatini?
Yes, doctor.
Can you give me two more?
Question and information.
Question and information. Good. Aina Mardia? Aina Mardia?
Main concept and point of view.
Concepts and point of view. Main concept and point of view. Good. Okay. Aina Sakina?
Yes, doctor.
Any two?
Implications and purpose.
Implication and purpose. Okay. Then I can proceed. I'm going to do the same thing. Anyone who doesn't answer, I will mark you as absent, even if you signed attendance. Because answering is different, but responding is something else. Who doesn't respond, I will mark you as absent. You may not answer correctly, no problem. But answering responding is a must. Okay, criteria for assessing the thinking. The first one was for analyzing the thinking. But these are the criteria in assessing the thinking. The thinking, the author provided in a paper how to assess it is these critical coming criteria. The first one, you will see more details in other topics. That's why I have no detail on it. I will still more on this one. The other one, in other topics, you will see more details. The criteria to assess thinking in the check is to check its one, clarity, second, accuracy, third, precision, fourth, relevance, fifth, depth, sixth, breadth, seventh, significance, eighth, logic, and ninth, fairness. We will go more detail on this. The previous one, I didn't provide details because you will be seeing it in different topics. You will see it even in critical appraisal for diagnosis, critical appraisal for prognosis. You will see the criteria there. But here, this one you don't see it in that good topic. That's why I didn't elaborate on it. Okay, let us see each of these. Clarity. The clarity is to determine the clarity, the reader asks the following questions. Did the paper elaborate the main points? Did the paper elaborate the main points? Did the paper express the points in another way Or in other words, did the paper give an illustration? Did the paper give an example? Did the paper state the main points in different words? These are types of questions, some type of questions that indicate and show the clarity in the statement. And remember, the statement could be equivalent to the purpose, which is driving the research. Statement of the research is the thesis that driving the research. The whole research lies within that purpose. And that purpose has to be clear. You as a reader, you may put these questions while looking at the paper. Determining the purpose, the aim, the objectives, and so on, you pose these questions. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, doctor.
Yes,
Yes,
yes
sir.
or no?
Okay. If no, if the line cut off, just use the chat box and type, because my handphone gives me headache.
Okay, doctor. Doctor, we can't hear you anymore. Doctor, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
not
sir.
agreed.
Yes, sir.
Okay, can you hear?
Yes, doctor.
Okay, then we proceed. Okay, then now let me go back. Who can give me one of the previous points we say about assessing the thinking? Those who responded earlier, please, you are accepted. Was that Aisha, Nurisha? Nuri,
Yes. Yes, doctor.
can you give me one of the point rather than clarity?
Accuracy.
Accuracy, good. Okay. Aisha Nabiha,
Fairness.
fairness. Aminatu,
Relevant.
sorry, saya dengar.
Relevant.
Louder. Relevance.
Relevant.
Okay. Relevance. Okay. Anis, Selena, Can you hear me, Anis?
Hello? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Significant?
Significance. Okay, good. Okay. Anis Nur Jana. Anis Nur Jana. Anis Nur Jana. Anis Farhana.
Logic,
Okay.
doctor.
Logic. Okay, good. Okay. Anusha.
Breath, doctor.
Breath. Okay, good. Uh, Auni. Auni Vida.
Precision.
Precision. Okay. Aya Nasaruddin.
Significance.
Significance. Ahmed Khalid. Ayham. Sorry, Ayham.
Accuracy.
Accuracy. Okay, Ayham, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Are you in Malaysia or in back home?
In Malaysia.
In Malaysia, okay. Bakri, Faida.
Clarity.
Louder, I can't hear you.
Clarity.
Clarity. Okay, let me proceed. Now, we say in determining clarities, these are the main questions. I'm going to proceed. I will come back to these points and ask you further on this one. The clarity is a gateway standard. If a statement is unclear, there is no way to determine whether it is accurate or relevant. In fact, the reader can't tell anything about it because he or she doesn't yet know what it is saying. Then clarity at the beginning. That's why when you read a paper, the first thing, make sure you are clear with what the author is saying. You may read it once, twice, 3 times. Because the moment you are clear with the statement the author is saying, you can proceed straightforward. The rest will be smooth. You will see how the author trying to argue, supporting the idea or refuting the idea. But if that is not clear, you can't proceed. That's why clarity is the first and foremost in reading any paper. If you find a paper, the authors are unable to make their points clear, the advice is better not to proceed. Because you will waste your time by reading it. Because if the purpose, the objective is not clear, reading the rest will not benefit you much. Okay? Second, accuracy. Accuracy also, there are questions we use to check the accuracy. Is the point accurately expressed? How could one check to see whether the point is accurate? How could one find out whether the point is true? You have to read between the lines. Keep this question in mind. Trying to find out the points, the accuracy of the points. Trying to find out what are the supporting points that shows that these points are valid, relevant into the research. Then accuracy become a key also in checking the paper. It's a secondary to the clarity because a paper could be clearly stated but not accurately expressed. Accuracy is not there. Clarity is there, but accuracy might not be there. Okay? The accuracy statement may be clear but not accurate, as in most dogs weigh more than 300 pounds. It's clear, but it's not accurate. To be accurate is to represent something in accordance with the way it actually is. Then accuracy is the consistency with what is expressed and the reality. If they are not consistent or not congruent, not in line together, then accuracy is not there. That's why be careful on accuracy. Clarity could be there, but accuracy might not be there. Writers often present or describe things or events in a way that is not in accordance with the way that actually they are. Reading, that's why when reading the papers, read with open-minded, putting question marks. Do not just accept whatever the author's argument is. No, read it with an open-minded. That's the power of critical thinking. You read with open-minded, because it might not be as in reality. And that is one part why we need quite often a reviewer. In any paper you want to publish, before publishing it, it must go under reviewing. Reviewing process, the reviewers will look at, double check the accuracy. We'll use all criteria and check one by one in the paper, whether the paper fulfill the criteria, respect it or not. Then accuracy is the consistency between the reality and what is expressed. Because expression is nothing more than reflecting what is the person have in mind. If that what the person express is consistent with the reality, then accuracy is there. If it is not, accuracy is not there. This is one of the reasons I asked you earlier, the conclusion and the introduction might not be the same. Because if there's any error in the data analysis or any bias in data collection, the conclusion will not be might not be consistent at all with the first statement. And accuracy is under question mark. Okay? Next, precision. Okay, before I proceed to precision, who can tell me the main points, the main questions to ask in clarity? Can I go back to the class? Okay. Amir, Sally? Sally? Amir? Amir, Sally? Are you in class? Sally? Look like no response. Anis, Selina?
The question asked in the clarity, I think is examples. And
yes, give me any examples.
No, the question is like the paper elaborate the main point.
Did the paper elaborate the main points? Okay, good. Okay, let me check. Bakar answer. Bakar, Faida, you answered last time. Yes or no?
You want to ask if the paper gives an example?
I can't hear you. Louder a bit.
You want to ask if the paper gives an example?
Yes. No, examples will provide the clarity. Can you give me one question to be asked to identify the clarity? Can you hear me, Bakar? Hello, Bakar. Can you hear me, the others?
Yes, can doctor.
And then Bakar is not. Barati?
Yes, doctor. So the
Any?
are did they give an illustration?
Did they provide illustration? Good. Baba? Any?
Did the paper state the main point in different words?
Good. Excellent. Okay. Vishma? Vishma?
Yes, doctor.
How are you, Vishma?
Did the paper give an example?
Did the paper give an example in illustrating the main points? Okay. Damia?
Did the paper express that point in another way?
Good. Chau Kai? Chau Chai or Chau Kai or Chau Chai? Hello, Chau?
Yes, doctor.
Can any example?
Um, did the paper give an illustration?
Did the paper give an illustration? Okay. Daniel, Hakim?
Did the paper state the main point in different words?
Yes. Okay, then I can proceed. Then we have seen clarity, we have seen precision. Now we can move to the next one. Then a statement can be both clear and accurate, but not precise. Precision is very important. It summarizes the ideas, make it in a short, rather than explaining in long sentences. Expressing it in a very short, precise is a very significant point in reading the papers. Some authors may have a long-winded writing or trying to express their idea when it is not clear at the beginning. It's better you go directly to the point and precisely state it. Then precision is a very important part, comes after accuracy. To be precise is to give the details necessary for someone to understand exactly what is meant. Some situations do not require detail. Then, but while reading, you can see if details are required, the authors may provide it. If details are required, the authors may ignore it. If details are required and the author doesn't mention it, it becomes a pitfall or a shortcoming in the paper because it makes the paper unclear. Because whereby details are needed more and the paper didn't provide details, it means the author didn't give the right details in that point. In other words, there is question mark under that point. Second point is usually in the papers also the long-winded statements will be cut off by the reviewers, because for publishing papers you are limited. You got even limited space in the journal. With a limited space, you can't put all what you want. You have to discard many things. Sometimes also the paper refer you to more detail somewhere else, because the journal itself doesn't allow them to provide details. They have to summarize it and cut it down into more points, or more precise points. If you want more detail, you have to go to appendix, or you go to other things and see the details, but not in the write-up. In many journals now, they will not allow the appendices to be included in the main write-up. The write-up will be only straightforward, few tables, few graphs. The rest only ask you to put at the end. And you find the details at the end as appendices. Then, while reading the papers, you need quite often to refer to get more details at the end of the papers. And critical thinking shows you how. Because by putting the question mark, you will know whether the author provides details and enough information or not. Okay, I proceed. The next one is relevance. Questions focusing on relevance include: how is this idea connected to the question? The ideas among themselves. I have ideas with the main question. How are they connected? Reading the literature review, the published papers that the author cites, you can see the papers are the papers the author cites. How are they related, connected to the main point? Then you have to keep in mind the main point of the paper and other papers that the author cites and quote them. How are they connected to the main point? That's a question you need to keep in mind. How does that bear on the issue in the research? What impact these ideas have on the research? This one will be quite details in any paper, mostly in the literature review. You will find 2-3 pages only reviewing other researches before proceeding to the main objective of the paper. All of this is telling you what has been done up to where the research is within the knowledge of the researcher. Because each researcher has limitations. Within my knowledge of the papers I review, I sum up to the level of current latest development in that point. I try my best to bring up to that point. If I'm able to do that, then I have gotten most of the paper, the ideas within my papers. Then you can see my papers or my idea or my research, how it built on next step based on what has been done. Okay? How does one idea relate to another idea? How ideas among themselves? Within the research itself, the research and other papers quoted from other researchers, how are they related? These are also questions you ask concerning the relevance. How does the question related to the issue the paper is dealing with? Ideas among themselves, ideas with others, ideas with the question the author is dealing with. These are relevant questions which you need to ask while reading the papers. Then critically evaluating papers requires number of questions. These questions all become second nature to a reader or critical reader. A critical reader always has this question in mind. While reading, these questions are triggering the brain and the papers is reading. That's why sometimes you find you read a paper, you put underline and question mark, big question mark in the paper or in the statement. These are the questions the reader has in mind looking within the papers, and the paper may not answer exactly. Okay? A statement can be clear, accurate, and precise, but not relevant to the question at issue. Okay? For example, students often think the amount of effort they put into a course should contribute to raising their grade in the course. Often, however, effort doesn't measure the quality of study, of students' learning. Effort doesn't measure the quality of study. You may spend 5 hours studying, another person spend 1 hour with better quality. Then the quality is more relevant than the quantity. That's why relevance is important also. Looking at the papers, look at the quality. The quality of the statements, not how many statements. Sometimes you find some authors cited abundant of these statements, but not much relevant. At the end, you may cut down many of them. As a critical reader, you will cross many of these cited ideas because you find that they are not so much relevant. The relevance is not so much. Then, while reading the papers, also look at what is relevant to the main points and what is not relevant to the main points. It's your responsibility to take care of this, because if you don't take care of it, you may get lost within the ideas, flying ideas. To control this one, you, as a reader, critical reader, you put question marks on the relevance of any idea. Okay, clear? Now, let me go back to the class asking points on the precisions. We have questions on the clarity, accuracy, precisions. But now, no, accuracy. Now I want to see the precision. Okay, let me hear Daniel Lokman.
Did the paper specify on the main point?
Okay, that's a precision or yes, precision. That's precision. Okay, Delia, Selvina.
Yes, doctor. Did the paper give more details on the main point?
More details on main points. Okay, let me move to the relevance, because precision, it looks like you have answered many of them. Okay. Eva, Sharika,
Yes,
Shakira.
doctor. Yes.
Eva, Sharika, Shakira. Sorry. Question relevance.
How is the idea connected to the question?
Yes. How the ideas according to the question, main question in the paper. One. Good. Okay. Iprina. Villa. Entra. Iprina. Are you in class? Iprina. No answer. Okay. Adelinda? Can you hear me?
Yes, doctor.
Any
How
questions on the relevance?
How does one idea relate to other ideas?
Ideas are related. Good. Okay. Virus?
How does the question relate to the issue the paper is dealing with?
Yes. The paper itself is dealing with an issue. How that issue, the question in the paper related is. Farah?
Yes,
Farah
Doctor.
Wadiha? Yes.
Yes.
Any question?
How is this idea connected to the question?
How the ideas are connected, the ideas, main ideas according to the question. Okay. Fatima? Lubana?
How does the question relate to the issue that the paper is dealing with?
I can proceed. Okay, now you see the relevance. And the statement can be clear, accurate, and precise, but not relevant to the question at hand. An example is given here. The depth. Questions focusing on the depth of a statement include how do the findings address the complexity in the question. Now we are looking the depth, the complexity of the research. Quite often, research is so complex. One question may not be able to express it. The author is forced to use several questions. Then you look at the depth also, you look at the finding. Because each question should be addressed by one of the findings. If I have 3, 4 questions in my paper, my finding cannot be one single finding. My finding should be at least 3 to 4 questions that I have, if not more, because questions that you have in a paper could generate 2 or 3 findings, one single question. You will learn more details in a questions in a papers in a hypothesis setting in questions. One question could show multiple regression. Multiple regression, you can state it in a one single question. But that question may carry, say, 5 independent variables against 1 dependent variable. Then each of these independent variable answer was a specific question. Then you will have 5 answers under one big question answer question. Then the depth is relevant. If the research topic or the topic requires a depth statement, depth question, one small question will not be able to answer it. Then the finding will not show also the accuracy in the questions. Then a broader question should be set up that capture all the sub-questions within that question. You will see more details, especially when you want to learn multiple regressions. Multiple regressions and opposite of chi-square, your frequency. You have a frequency table. When you get in chi-square, you have, because chi-square consists of 2 parts, goodness of fit and the frequency. The goodness of fit answering basic questions, but frequency answering more depth questions. Same thing, regression answering more questions than t-test. T-test answering basic questions only. ANOVA answering more questions than also t-test. That is the difference. That's the depth. Some papers are quite complex, simply because the idea, the topic they are trying to analyze is quite complex. Then the simple question will not work. Will not. They must have a depth question. Okay, how are the findings take into account the problem in the question? The findings also in relation to the main points. How are the findings dealing with the most significant factors in the problem? Then all these, the findings are related to the main questions. And looking the findings and the question shows you the depthness in the paper. Some papers requires a careful and detailed reading due to the complexity of the issues. Many current papers on COVID researchers express the topic in a very detailed, in a very complex, because of the nature of the research. Because COVID has so many related variables that when you are studying it, you have to take into account these variables. In fact, you can't just look at the transmission rate. There are other factors that are related to transmission rate, infection rate, and so on. And just say I want to study infection rate, I have to look at more details in the so many factors that are relevant to this. Could be in a household, office, distancing, having a infected person, having non-infected person, and so on. Many variables become relevant in the study. That's why in-depth also is relevant while critically reading the papers. Consider this as part of your questions you put in mind. A statement can be clear, accurate, precise, and relevant, but superficial, not in detail. Superficial, not in detail. Should go more sophisticated in answering the questions. The point. Superficial will not give you depth in the topic. Complex topic requires complex statements, complex questions. Then keep in mind also these questions. While reading papers, you will find moderate, easy, and complex. Complex paper doesn't mean not accurate, because the topic is dealing is complex, requires complexity. You can't handle it with a simple, superficial question. Doesn't work. Okay? The breadth. Questions to determine the breadth include: do the paper consider other points of view? Depth and breadth are quite close. Depth is dealing with the topic itself and relevant variables to the topic. But breadth is crossing within the other topics, in connection with other topics. How the findings or the question I'm trying to study, or the question the paper is presenting in connection with other papers, how is it? Is there other ways to look at this question? Is there another way the author could look at the question? What would this look like from other findings? The finding you have in hands, compare with other findings, how it look like. What's its validity? What is liability? These are also questions you need to keep in mind while reading papers. What would this look like from point of view of others? How others also look at it. I look at from others' viewpoint, myself. Now, how others look my point of view? How others would judge my viewpoint? This shows you the breadth in the discussion, or in the paper, or in the statements. Okay? Can I go back again? Can you hear me? You want to answer? Okay, thank you. Fatia,
Yes, doctor.
any question regarding the depth?
How are the findings taking into account the problems in the question?
Okay, good. Fatin Nabiha,
How are the findings dealing with the most significant factors in the problem?
good. Hanani,
How do the findings address the complexities in the question?
yes, address also. Good. Humaira, Rashida,
Yes, doctor.
any questions on the depth?
Mm, how are the findings dealing with the most significant factors in the problem?
Yes, okay, good. Okay, proceed. Then we have seen also the breadth. A line of reasoning may be clear, accurate, precise, relevant, and depth, sorry, not deep, depth, but lack breadth. Okay? Not wide. It's deep, but not wide. Wide, the broader or the broad of the question is not there. And the breadth also is part of the significant part in your critical review. Okay, logic. Now I move to logic. Questions to determine logical argument include: does all of these fit together logically? At the end, putting together all ideas, do they fit logically, congruent, consistent, logically going together? Does this really make sense? In other words, does it make sense to me, to a reader? Does that follow from what the paper said? Do the conclusions follow the argument at the beginning of the paper? Logical. How does the follow from the evidence? How does that follow from the argument? The evidence you have in hands. How do they support the argument that you start at the beginning? Showing congruency, showing consistency. Then also logical reasoning help a reader to evaluate the paper. While reading a paper, open up your mind, look at the logic behind, the consistency behind the argument the authors stated. From the statement at the beginning till the conclusion and implications, look at how the ideas are consistent. A well-written paper becomes smoothly read that when you start reading, you almost will complete it because you find and see the flow going together. So one, you see the flow straight. This argument, next supporting it or opposing it. You see the argument going together. Consistency become a main theme of the paper. Then while reading also you have to keep in mind the logic of the argument. Okay? When findings combine all together or relevant questions, mutually supporting and making sense in combination, the findings are logical. Then totality. In the logic, you are looking at totality together. Ideas together. Togetherness, how do they mutually support each other? How do they back each other? How do they validate each other? When the combination is not mutually supporting, is contradictory in some sense, or does it make sense, the combination is not logical. Then, looking at the papers, also you should consider how logical the argument is. Then, The big logically arguing is very important part in a paper you read. Logical argument flows very well if the paper is well written. The author may have sophisticated equipment, sophisticated analysis, but in the write-up, not well, smoothly written. Keep that in mind also. Not all papers are well and smoothly written. You'll find within the lines some ideas that are not smoothly written. Should be forward or backward. Should be in front or at the back. Should be at the beginning or at the end. In the conclusion or in the implications. That all is part of also in your critical reading of the papers. Okay? The significance. Questions that focus on the significance of a research include: what is the most significant information the paper address? The most significant information. Question the paper address. What is the fact? Why or how this fact is in a context? How is that fact important in context? In the context you are reading, how the fact the paper presented are important. That is also another question you put in mind. Which of these questions is the most significant? You may have several questions. Which one is the priority, the most significant? If you have logistic regression, you run it. You find what is known as main effect and non-main effect. They have main effect and non-main effect. When the main effect is not significant, the factors has no meaning because their significance is based on the main. The main is the totality, togetherness. How do they explain the research question, the research objective? If the variables togetherness are not expressing, are not telling exactly together among themselves, then they may not be able separately to explain the paper. Then in some papers, the significance become a very significant part. Which of these questions is the most significant? Which of these ideas or concept is the most important in determining the significance of the paper? These are questions also one have to ask while assessing the significance in the paper. Okay, let me go back a bit and put questions to some of you. Joy?
Yes, doctor.
Any questions on the logic?
Does all the information fit together logically?
Logically, good. Camelia? Or Kanani? Kanan?
Yes, doctor.
Any question on the logic?
No, doctor.
No, okay. Okay. Kenny?
Yes, doctor.
Any relevant question on logic that you can recall?
Does the argument follow what the paper says?
Yes, good, right. Kirsharu Pini?
Yes, doctor.
Any questions relevant to logic?
Does this really make sense?
Doesn't make sense. Good. Lim Chung Yi,
Yes, doctor.
any question relevant to the logic?
How does it follow from the evidence?
How is the progress? Good. Okay. Mariam, can I take you back to the depth? Mariam? Everybody?
Yes, doctor.
Any questions on the depth or breadth?
On the depth. On the depth, there's questions on how do the findings. Oh, give me a second, doctor.
Echo.
Oh yeah. For the depth, how do the findings address the complexity in the question, and breadth? Do the paper consider another point of view?
Okay, good. Very good. Mashita? Mashita?
Yes, doctor. Yes, doctor.
Any question on the breadth and depth?
What will this look like from other finding?
Compared to other findings, have look like good. Okay. Then let me proceed. Significance. We
Doctor?
say we have to. Yes.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Yes, please.
I want to ask about the breath. Can we also insert another point of view, which is contra with our finding? Because if can, is it considered still considered as a logic because it does not support our statement?
Okay. Other contradicting or not supporting findings are very good part. It shows you the possibility of mistakes in your finding or mistakes in their findings. It falls under depth and breadth because it's open your eyes. It tells you might be possible possible mistakes you did, or possible variables you missed. Important significant variables you have to include, you missed them. Or it tells you you have more detail, capture more variables, more data, more rigorous analysis compared to others. Then you have to go back, check your data, your analysis. Check their data, their analysis. Check their sample size, compare your sample size. The representativeness of your sample size compared to the sample size. That is what you look when you find inconsistent from your paper in other papers. Within your paper is different, but with other papers you look at. It gives you more detail. You have to check all your details. Check their details. Now, definitely you come to conclusion. You are in a stronger point or they are in a stronger point. You see my point?
Yes, sir.
That is what I have as answer. Any more points? What do you think yourself? Amar, what do you think?
For the contradicting point, you mean?
Yes, from other papers.
I guess, yeah, it increases the depth of our paper.
Okay, one of the reasons increases your paper or their paper. Because it's either way. Either way. In the next lecture, I will give one paper. Please look at it in detail. A paper have different views and different findings and challenging points. And I want you to look at it carefully. I don't upload it here, but I upload it in my next class, inshallah. Okay, shall I proceed?
Yes,
any more
thank you.
Any more questions? Any more questions from others? I updated the slides. I wanted to go more detail, but I didn't have much time to go more detail. Otherwise, I would give more details in this. But I cited the main points since it's 1 hour, 2 hours only. Supposed to be only 1 hour and a half, but they make it 2 hours. But fine. I was even planning to add one more paper in this. So do you see the applications? Straightforward. And unfortunately, I couldn't make it. Okay. The significance, the reader should reason through issues and concentrate on the most important information relevant to the issue in the paper and take into account the most important ideas or concept. While looking the significance, you look at the most important part. Because the priority, if it is achieved, the secondary could be compromised. But you miss the priority, you cannot focus on the secondary. You have to achieve the priority before going to the secondary. That is the main point the author should do. You look at while looking at the author. The last one is the question on focus on the ensuring the argument is the paper is fair and is the fair. This includes, is the idea justified given the evidence? Based on the evidence, is the question at the beginning justified? In other words, does evidence or do the evidences in line and support the question at the beginning? Is the paper taking into account the weight of the evidence that other made advance in the situation? The paper taking into account with other views, how is the paper? Is close to the question you just asked. My paper, my research, my finding, my analysis compared to others. Are they in line, supporting each other, or different? If they are in line, backing each other, we call external validity. You have external validity. Because this one conduct research, this one conduct research, without seeing each other, come to a similar or same conclusion. It tells us the validity of your approach, the validity of the other's approach, and both of you the validity together. So we call external validity. Then, are these assumptions justified? In any paper, you find assumptions. Do the authors or the findings in line with the assumptions? Assumptions are supported or not? Or do the findings or the analysis violate assumptions? You will see it in your analysis. When you go to analysis, you will see using discrete data, running it using the continuous techniques may violate the assumptions, because discrete data assumptions is different from continuous data assumptions. Each of them, the techniques used in mathematics, statistics to do the analysis, have its own assumption. Cross analysis may indicating violation of it. So I always, in any paper, a brief presentation on the validity of the assumptions is presented in the analysis. A brief assumptions, in few lines only, showing the consistency, not whether the analysis violate the assumptions or not. Always, mostly, is presented in the papers. Is the purpose fair given the implications of the research? Also, at the end, you see the effort, resources, time put into the paper justify compared to the finding. That also another question you raise. If you put extreme effort, the finding has little implication, it is not worthy to do the research. And that could be assessed at the beginning, because the implications are worthy. However, keep in mind, your research, your finding, are significant or not, doesn't mean not relevant. You could conduct research from beginning to the end and come up with non-finding research results or findings, non-significant findings. What does it mean? It means some variables that supposed to be included are not included, or the data we collect is not enough, or the analysis we use not so accurate, not so rigorous, we could use another more rigorous analysis, and so on. Then the fairness is captured by looking at the justification in the assumptions, because all of these at the end show the fairness and the implications. Okay, now let me ask you a few questions before I conclude this lecture. Okay, Michelle?
Yes, doctor.
Can you give me the questions on the last point? What was it? What was it? Significance. Yes.
What is the most important, what is the most significant information the paper addressed?
Yes, good. Mikhail, or Miracle? Sorry, Miracle. Miracle. Miracle Meda. Miracle. Are you in Malaysia or outside Malaysia? No answer. Okay, Amar answer. Muaz? Muaz, sorry, Muaz Aikal.
Which of these questions is most important?
Important. Which of these questions is more important? Showing the significance of the paper. Okay. Muhammad Anis, Anas, sorry, Muhammad Anas. Echo.
How is that fact important in context?
Yes, in context, how the fact is important, how the research, the finding, or the statement are important. Okay, and the last one, we conclude it. Okay, in summary, critical thinking is a thinking that is guided by standards in analyzing, evaluating any research paper in order to come to a conclusion whether the findings support the arguments made by the authors and whether the findings are valid, reliable, and applicable to the circumstances. So the main points in critical thinking. It has several steps that any reader, writer has to take. Because of time constraint, I didn't provide more details, but I have more details on this topic. I stop here. And any questions from your side before I end the classes?
Doctor, do you mind explaining the difference between precise and accuracy just now?
Okay, precise and accuracy. Okay, precise, the question or statement in the research is precisely stated. It's precisely stated. It's clear. Like for example, go back again to see the difference. Yes. Accuracy. What's happening? Okay. Accuracy is the question is difference between accuracy and precise, isn't it? Right?
Yes, doctor.
Okay. Accuracy is the findings compared to the statement. The findings with regard to the question at the beginning. The question in the paper with regard to the data collection. The question in the paper with regards to the variables stated. You see? A paper may have a precise question, but the data collection may not reflect it. May not reflect it. Then accuracy becomes an issue. The analysis may not reflect it. Accuracy becomes an issue. The hypothesis and the variables included in the research all may not reflect it well. Accuracy becomes an issue. Contrary, the question may be very precise, very precise in its stand alone. That's different in precision and accuracy. Accuracy is looking across the question in the paper and the variables, assumptions, data collections, and the finding. While precision is looking by within, is the question itself precisely stated? Is clear? Is it clear? Who asked the question?
Yeah, I think so, doctor.
Okay. If not clear, let me know. Any more question from your side?
Doctor, can we have the slides?
Yes, I'll upload. Don't worry, I'll upload it. I'll upload it.
All right, thank you.
I will upload it in the portal. In the same portal, I'll upload it. After the class, I'll upload it, inshallah. Okay, if no,
sorry, doctor. So the logic part, right? Is taking all the questions and then see if they make sense when correlated to each other.
yes. Are they correlated? Are they making sense together? At the end of evaluation of a paper, you look at togetherness. If the paper has 5 variables, 6 variables, 3 variables, you look at these 3 variables together, supporting the statement in the paper. Okay, you will find more details in what we call consistency. Validity and reliability tells you the consistency, especially validity. Reliability. Reliability is the consistency. If within, mostly we use alpha Cronbach to say within the items or the variables in the paper. We use mostly alpha Cronbach. Out between the papers, we go for other correlations to see how are they correlated. Likewise, validity shows you within and outside. Your research compared to other researchers. Your concepts compared to other concepts. Your variables compared to other variables. Are you using right variables compared to others? That is the concept of issue of validity. Reliability is the issue of within the paper only. Within the paper only. That is the issue also you need to keep in mind. Okay? Any more? If no, then you can sign your attendance, and few of you who didn't respond in the class, I would mark them, unfortunately, as absent. Because I don't know. They just log in Validator, or they log in, cannot communicate with me. Okay then, we stop here, inshallah. Thank you very much, and see you.
Thank you, Doctor.
When will be our next class?
Thursday.
Thursday. What time?
9 a.m.
9 a.m. And will be two topics, because diagnosis and prognosis are two topics. Are supposed to be taking more hours. Suppose it's supposed to, but never mind. Each of them can take 1 hour. Quickly and proceed, inshallah. Okay, then thank you very much.
Doctor?
I will upload the questions. Yes, please.
Doctor, for the attendance, what should we write? Because we're supposed to answer your question.
Anyone who answer any question of my questions, how many questions did I ask you? Write any one of the answers I ask you.
Oh, all right, Doctor.
Is that the questions I asked during the classes? Any of them?
All right, Doctor.
You write that.
All right. Thank you, Doctor.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Joanna? Okay. Any more questions? Anything? Okay, then thank you very much. You stop here. Go for your lunch in next class. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Doctor.
Bye.